For this mock exercise, we're going to take a look at, again, another variance analysis, but this time it's much more comprehensive. And we're going to take a look at a company called Molly's Old Fashioned Cookies. So let's take a look at the question. So the first part of the question describes what this company does. It makes chocolate chip cookies. It bakes cookies for retail stores. And it says that the company's best-selling cookies is a chocolate nut supreme, which is marketed as a gourmet cookie and sells for $9.60 per kilogram. So that's the sales price. So I'll put the word SP beside it for sales price. The standard cost per kilogram of chocolate nut supreme based on Aunt Molly's normal production capacity of 400,000 kilograms. And this is the standard, right? This is the standard cost. So each cookie requires cookie mix, 625 grams. And each gram of cookie, or each kilogram, costs 0.384 per kilogram. That's the total cost per cookie. Or per kilogram of cookies, right? Milk chocolate is another part of the ingredients, and almonds is another part of the ingredients. So altogether, it's $1.74 per kilogram of chocolate nut supreme. There's also labor, there's mixing and baking. So this is the standard recipe, isn't it? Now, Aunt Molly's management accountant, Karen, prepares a monthly budget report on the standard cost, and this is what the performance report looks like. If you see the budget, they budgeted to make 400 kilograms of cookies, and they're actually made 450 kilograms of cookies, so there's a positive variance of 50, a volume variance. And if you look at it, you'll see that revenue is a lot higher, and of course the cost would expectedly be an unfavorable variance because we made more cookies than what the standard budget is of 400 cookies. So now we're asked to probably analyze these variants. We want to be able to look at each one of these variants and analyze whether we should be, we should be happy or we should be a little bit more concerned about why these variants exist. In terms of 2013, we can see that this is the usage report. This is what we actually used. We actually end up using 290 kilograms of cookie mix, 161,720 kilograms of milk chocolate, and of course almonds of 29,688. And these are the actual labor minutes that we end up using for this month's production. Now, we're asked to compute the following variance. We're asked to look at selling price variance, material, both price and efficiency, and labor, both price and efficiency. But I want to expand this question because I want to actually talk about the variance analysis from a global perspective. In other words, we do not want to analyze the variance starting with the static budget, which is what this is. And that's essentially what this is, static, right? To calculating the flexible variance. So before we do that, I thought I would show you a couple of, technical material with regards to variance analysis. So first, we have what we call actuals, okay? And we're going to compare to the static budget. And of course, the difference between the two is what we call the static budget variance. What we need to do to make this variance meaningful is we need to create what we call a flexible budget. And what a flexible budget really is a budget based on actual output. Had we known what we're going to make in terms of number of kilograms, had we known that we were actually going to produce 450,000 kilograms of chocolate chips supreme, then the next question asked is, what would have been the flexible budget? Okay? Now, the difference between that is going to create what we call a flexible budget. So the flexible budget is the difference between flexible and actual results. Now, there are several variances. The one that's being asked is we need to calculate the direct labor and direct material. They're called variable manufacturing overhead. We need to calculate price and efficiency variance. We also have to calculate what we call volume variance. What is the variance in these costs related to the fact that we sold 50,000 more kilograms of chocolate chips? So what is the volume variance related to that? And that's what we're going to calculate as well. So this is the cost. This is the revenue. Because clearly we need to also look at the revenue variance as well, the selling price variance. So again, we want to calculate, is the variance relate to price? In other words, did we charge our customer more or less than what we expected? And also to do with sales volume as well. So these two are the same. So let's actually go into and dive into the question. Okay. So first of all, I want to calculate the selling price variance. That's the first part they asked us, right? So we know the formula is actual price minus budgeted price times actual quantity sold. So what is the actual price? The actual price, okay, is, we're going to take 4,266,000 divided by 450. That will tell us the actual price per unit. What was the budgeted price? How do we find that? Well, the budgeted price would be the 3,840,000 divided by the 400,000. That gives us the budgeted price, doesn't it? Okay? Now, what was the actual output? Actual quantity sold, we sold 450,000 kilograms. So the sales price variance is going to be 948 less 960 times 450 gives me an unfavorable variance of 54,000. It's unfavorable because the actual price, it's much less than the budgeted price. Does that make sense? Okay. So now we're going to actually do the variance analysis. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually do the variance analysis, both direct labor and direct material. I'm going to be using this. I'm going to try to use a chart. And I'm going to try to put the static budget in there as well. So why don't we do that? So let's start with actuals. So what was the actual cost? We know that the actual cost for the material is the sum of these actual costs. So this is what we incurred. In terms of labor, this is what we incurred as well. So we have been given the actual composition of material and labor based on this usage report. So I'm just going to write that down here, okay? So direct material, I'm going to short form to DM. I have cookie mix. That was 111.3 360. Milk chocolate 621,005. And almonds 285. Now, for direct labor, DL, I've got mixing, so I'll just use the word mix. That was given to us at 129, and baking. Now, what I want to do is I want to create another column on this right-hand side, and then I want to create a static budget. I think it's important to kind of isolate the static and the flexible budget. Okay? So I'm going to move this along on this side. I'm going to put the word static on this one, right? How do we determine the static budget? Well, we originally are supposed to make 400,000. So I need to figure out what would have been the static budget for these 400,000. I know in total it's 696. I know in total it's 403,200. How do I make that? Well, let me show you how it's done. So for the first one, for materials, what was the standard? The standard is, for materials, we need 625 grams times 0.834 grams per kilogram times 400,000. So really what I want is, if this is the standard, I'm going to take 0.24 times 400,000, 0.9 times 400,000, and 0.6. So it's actually, we're given those standard units, right? So the first one is 0.24 times 400 kilograms gives me 96,000. That's the static for material, cookie mix. For milk chocolate, it would be 90 cents times 400,000. That gives me 360. And for almonds, it will be 60 cents times 400,000 to give me 240. Together, we know this is 696. And that ties in with the 696 here, right? The static budget. Now, I want to do the same thing for labor. Labor, it says, I need 1 minute for mixing times 17.28 per hour. That gives me 0.288 times 400,000 to give me 115,200. The same thing with this one. I need 2 minutes times 20 on 2160 per hour. So that's 0.720 times 400,000 to give me 288. So that's the static budget. So now I want to create a flexible budget, right? And remember, flexible budget, the only difference is we had 400 kilograms. This is 450 kilograms. Okay? So I'm going to take exactly the same formula, except I'm going to calculate 450, using 450 kilograms, because that's the actual output. Okay, so I'm going to do exactly the same thing. So I'm going to take 0.24 times 450 gives me 108. So I'll do exactly the same thing here. 0.24 times 450 this time gives me 108. So now I want to make these comparison. So the variance to do with volume, it's called sales volume variance. The difference between these two is going to be 12,000 unfavorable. Why is it unfavorable? Because I produced 50,000 more, and these are cost. So of course it's going to cost me more. But I'm going to compare that to the sales, right? And that will determine whether, right, if a profit or not. Okay? Next, I'm going to take the same thing, 0.90 times 450,000. That gives me 405. And that difference is going to give me a 45,000 unfavorable variance. I should use purple on that one, actually. Now, next, I'm going to take 0.6 times 450. And this gives me a variance of 30,000 unfavorable. So altogether, it's an 87,000 unfavorable. And this is 783. I'll do exactly the same thing for labor. So 0.288 times 450. And this is 0.720 times 450. This gives me 129,600. Altogether, this is 453. So looking at the variance, the difference in these two is an unfavorable and an unfavorable 36,000, right? And altogether, it's a 52,000 unfavorable. So part of the difference between these two, the actual and the static, part of it is to do with sales volume. So this is called sales volume variance. Now, I need to create a third column, another column here, that allows me to determine price and efficiency. So I need a third column, and the third column is going to be actual input times budgeted price. And this tells me that this is the price variance, the difference between these two, and efficiency variance. So how do we determine this? So let's think about this again. What was the actual output, or the actual input, sorry? We used 290 kilograms. What was the standard price per kilogram? 0.384 per kilogram. So we have standard actual input times budgeted price. These are actual times budgeted price. That's exactly what we're going to do. Okay? So the standard actual units of input, this was, I'm going to use red in this case, 290 times 0.384. This gives me 111,360. I'll worry about these two variants in a minute. What's the next one? Standard input of milk chocolate was 161,720 kilograms. Times, what was the standard price per kilogram? $2.88. That gives me 465,754. Next, what about almonds? How many kilograms of almonds did I use? I used 29,688 kilograms times, what was the price per kilogram? It was $9.60. So I used 29,688 kilograms actual usage times $9.60. So the total is 862,114. Now, I want to take a look at this. The actual was 11,111,360. We actually used 111,360, so there are no price variants. But it looks like we have an inefficient use of cookie mix is 3,360 unfavorable. Now, that could be because we may have some waste, right? There could be some waste issue. Okay? And the reason why there's no price variance, it could be because we secured a long-term pricing agreement for a cookie mix. So if you did that and you secure that and you fix the price, there shouldn't be a price variance. But I can see why there could be efficiency variance because we may use more cookie mix, less cookie mix, or we may have wasted when we start the production. So that makes sense. Again, we're trying to come up with a logical reasoning behind it. Now, for milk chocolate, this we spent way more on price. And again, that could be because the price of milk or price of chocolate, depending on, because those are commodities, it may have gone up, and we can't control that. And of course, in this case, there is an unfavorable variance of 60,754. And there could be some sort of waste issue as well. With almonds, there are no price variance, so clearly we've secured a long-term contract with them. And it's a 15,000 unfavorable variance. So now we can take a look at why we overspent, why we spent $1,017,000 versus $783. We can then go to the purchasing manager and ask them to explain why we have these variants, and we can go to the production manager and get them to explain why we have inefficiency variances. And that is part of the tools in management. We need to be able to go and analyze these variants and make sure it makes sense. Same thing with labor. And with labor, it took us 450 minutes to mix. Right? 450 minutes to mix. How do I know that? Well, we're told that, right? How much is it per hour? It should have been $17.28 per hour, right? So we're going to take 450 minutes divided by 60 minutes to get to the hour. multiply by 1728. And we get 129,600. Now, there should be no price variance, rate variance, and there's no efficiency. Now, if you think about it, these are a machine. The machine should not be inefficient. When it mixes, it probably times how many minutes to mix that dough, right? So it's logical to see no rate or no efficiency variance because it's all done by machine. Okay? Let's look at the other one. And the other one is the baking. That too, let's think about that. How many minutes of baking? 800 minutes divided by 60 minutes per hour times the rate of 2160. That rate of variance, so that total, is 288. So the sum of this, 2, is 417. Now, is there a variance in terms of price? The answer is no. Right? Because they're machines. It's probably a machine that we bought, we amortize it, and this is probably, right? The charge out rate per minute makes sense, right? The price. That's why it doesn't make sense to have any variance with regards to machine-like processing. But let's take a look at, there could be efficiency variance. And in this case, there is. In fact, it is favorable. That means that we end up using less amount of time in the oven. So maybe the oven was quite, was efficient enough to cook all those cookies. So that is how we do the variance analysis. So we've answered the question. We are able to get the labor and efficiency variance and the direct material price and efficiency variance. We're able to calculate the selling price variance as well. And let me just give you guys a little bit of an overview of what this has. Okay? And that's essentially the entire question. Thank you.